Hello, I'm Evan with New Life for Old Bikes. In this episode, we're going to be changing the tires on a bicycle. If you've had a flat tire, this would also be a good episode for you to watch. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks that'll make this project very easy. First, I'd like to point out that there is tread left on the front tires. It's plenty if you're riding on the street. However, if you're in a loose dirt or gravel, this is not enough to grip. The first thing we're going to do is release the brake so that we'll be able to remove the wheel. All I have to do on a set of V-brakes is grab the brakes, compress them, and remove the cable. It's that simple. If you have caliper brakes, the easiest way to accomplish this is simply by letting the air out of the tire. If you have disc brakes, you can skip this step entirely. The next step to remove the wheel is very simple. In this case, we're going to go ahead and release the quick release at the bottom of the fork. Then we're going to go ahead and loosen it a few turns. The wheel will simply drop out of the frame. If you have a bicycle that the wheel is bolted on, you will simply loosen the nuts counterclockwise and remove the wheel from the frame. The next thing we need to do is release the air pressure from the tire. There are two common valves available. The most common is the Schrader valve. It's on most cars. It's also on bicycles. The second is a Presta valve. In order to release the pressure in the Presta valve, you have to actually loosen the valve and press on it. The Schrader valve, you'll need to take an object and press the valve in. You could use screwdrivers to remove the tire from the wheel, but unfortunately you stand a very good possibility of puncturing the tube. I prefer using tire levers. This particular set came included with a tube that I purchased. I prefer to start fairly close to the valve, slide the tire lever in behind the tire, and latch it in place. Next, I take the next one and come in close and slide it around the wheel. Just a note here, the narrower the tire, the harder this process is. The narrower tires tend to fit much tighter than wide tires like this. Once one side of the tire is removed from the wheel, simply reach in behind and pull out the tube. If you are installing a tire with directional tread, just be aware that the quick release is always on the non-drive side of the tire. We're going to set the tire into the wheel and push it in place. Next, we're going to find the hole for the valve and put it up. When installing a tube, if it's a brand new tube, make sure you put a little bit of air in it to get it started. Slide the valve through the hole and seat it. And push the tire in all the way around. Once the tube is in the tire, simply push the other side of the bead behind the inside of the wheel. If you have caliper brakes on your bike, now would be the time to reinstall the wheel. Although this is not of any critical importance, I prefer to put the logo above the valve stem simply because it's easier to find the valve stem. I'm going to put in about 20 pounds of air pressure. This particular pump has a pressure gauge on it, but I could also be using a tire pressure gauge. When adding air pressure back into a tire that has a tube with a Presta valve, remember after you pump up the tire to tighten the valve back up. Otherwise, the air pressure will leak back out. Once I've got some pressure in it, I'm going to check the bead and make sure that it's seated evenly. I'd rather find out now than when I have it at full pressure and it blows out of the wheel. Then I'm simply going to blow it up to the recommended pressure. There we go. That looks good. Once complete, remember to reinstall your cap. This simply protects the valve. When you install your wheel, make sure that the quick release is on the non-drive side of the bike. That's the side without the gears. If your tires are directional, make sure that they're pointed in the right direction. Slide the tire up through the brake pads. Line up the axle with the stem and slide it in place. Snug up the opposite side of the quick release, and make sure that when you install it, first you have the wheel centered in the frame, and second you want to make sure that this quick release is facing back. If you have it facing forward and you hit a branch, you could potentially loosen your wheel. The last thing we're going to do is squeeze the brakes together and reinstall the cable. That's as complicated as that gets. Now that we've reinstalled the front wheel, we're going to go on to the back wheel. The first thing we're going to do is release the brake on the back of the bike. Again, all I'm doing is clamping the two sides of the brake together and pulling out the cable. The next thing I'm going to do is release the quick release. The trickiest part of this is to simply pull the derailleur out of the way and slide the back wheel out through the frame. Just a little note here, the back tread is almost completely gone off of this wheel. I tend to skid around corners. Changing the tire on the front or the back of the bike is exactly the same procedure. So I'm going to do this off camera. When we come back, I'll show you how to reinstall the back wheel. I made sure when I did the back tire that I put the logo directly over the valve, and the valve cap is installed as well. When installing the back wheel, just make sure you pull the chain around the lowest gear on the cog, pull the derailleur back, and slide the wheel up through the brakes. Next, line the axle up, snug up your axle, and tighten your quick release. Make sure your quick release is facing forward but angled up. Again, you don't want any branches catching this and releasing your wheel. Don't face it down or backwards. It's too easy to catch on something. The last thing we're going to do is reconnect the back brakes. To do this, I'm going to hold the two sides of the brake together and slide the cable into the cable bracket. Perfect. Everything I've shown you today could just as easily be done on the side of the road. I've done it myself. Generally, I carry a pack, and in that pack is a spare tube, a couple of tools, and a very small air pump. Let me know if you have any questions, and don't forget, like and subscribe.